There's a kind of silence within the mind that isn't peace. It's emptiness. It's like looking in the mirror and not recognizing what you feel. Because in truth, you feel nothing. It's not sadness. It's not pain. It's something stranger, an absence. It's waking up and realizing you're living on autopilot. It's going through moments that should move you, an important conversation, a compliment, a strong memory, and feeling nothing but a faint, distant echo. It's like looking at a white wall and feeling like you are the wall. You watch people laughing, crying, vibrating, getting emotional about things that seem too real to you. And in that instant, you realize something you never admit aloud. You feel like an intruder in your own life, an actor playing emotions you can no longer access. There's a hidden discomfort in that, a feeling that you should be different, that something in you got lost along the way. You try to force a reaction, any reaction, but the most that emerges is a superficial reflex, as if the emotion had been switched off at the source. And inside, a question grows endlessly. What happened to me? What no one told you is that this emotional numbness is not weakness. It's not a failure. It's not an inability. In fact, it's an extremely sophisticated defense mechanism. When you were a child, teenager, or even an adult, there were times when feeling too much put you at risk. Emotional risk, psychological risk, risk of breaking down internally. So your brain did something you never realized. It created a safety plan. It analyzed the pain, the chaos, the fear, the confusion, and concluded that the best way to protect you was to switch off the emotional system. Reduction of sensation, decrease in intensity, risk level controlled. The problem? This mechanism was designed to be temporary, but you maintained it for years. Now, you live in a state where nothing hurts too much, but nothing truly touches you either. And this gives you the feeling of always being one step behind life. Physically present, emotionally absent, neither sad nor happy, neither near nor far. But here's the most important part, the one that changes everything. You are not broken. You are not emotionless. You haven't lost your capacity to feel. Your brain hasn't failed you. It tried to save you. The question now is, what exactly was it trying to protect you from? Because as long as you continue to believe that this emptiness is your natural state, you will think that's how life is. Gray, silent, distant. But it isn't. In the next part, we'll get to the real cause of this numbness. The circuit breaker box that your brain uses to prevent you from burning out inside. And when you understand this, you'll realize that the problem was never a lack of emotion. It was an excess of pain. There's a simple metaphor that explains exactly what's happening inside you and why your emotions have been switched off without you realizing it. Imagine your mind as a house. In a house, when the voltage gets too high, when something threatens to burn out wires, outlets, or appliances, what happens? The circuit breaker trips. It shuts everything down to prevent the structure from collapsing. Your brain works the same way. You haven't lost the ability to feel. Your emotional circuit breaker tripped. And it tripped because at some point in your life, the emotional intensity became too high for you to handle. To understand this, we need to look at two internal systems. The amygdala, the danger alarm. The prefrontal cortex. the rational center that tries to keep you functioning. When the amygdala perceives a threat, physical, emotional, or psychological, it activates survival mode. There are 3 classic responses: fight, flight, or freeze. Emotional numbness is the freeze response. It's not absence. It's hypoactivation. It's the purposeful reduction of your emotional energy to keep you alive. And here's the crucial point. This mechanism doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's learned. For many people, emotional numbness is born long ago, when feeling was too dangerous. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where showing emotion resulted in punishment. Talking about feelings was useless. Being sensitive was a cause for shame. Asking for help resulted in humiliation. Having emotional needs created conflict. Then the brain concluded something simple, logical, and brutal. Feeling equals pain. Therefore, not feeling equals safety. And from then on, the circuit breaker box inside you became automatic. Any sign of emotional risk, rejection, criticism, vulnerability, failure, intimacy, makes the brain shut down the circuit before you even realize it. It's not weakness. It's protection. You didn't become cold. You became too protected. And this protection creates a silent paradox. The more you try to force an emotion, the more the internal alarm goes off, and the more the circuit breaker trips the emotional system to keep you in a state of freeze. But here's the most interesting detail of this story. This mechanism is the same one that builds the false identity, the emotional mask you presented in video 05 and developed in video 08. The mask only survives if you don't feel too much. So the brain, to keep the mask standing, reduces the emotional flow. The numbness, at its core, is the maintenance system of the false identity. That's why, even when your life improves, even when people like you, even when there's no more real danger, you remain switched off. Your brain hasn't updated the software. It still believes that the emotional world is a minefield, and that you need to walk through it without making a sound, without feeling too much, without showing yourself completely. In the third part, we will reveal the hidden price of this. Because when the brain shuts down pain, it shuts down everything. There is a silent consequence when the brain shuts down your emotions, a consequence that almost no one notices, but that defines how you live your life. It's the paradox of emotional numbness. The brain believes it's protecting you, but in doing so, it disconnects you from the very things that would make you feel alive. And here's the truth no one likes to admit. You can't selectively turn off just the pain. When the brain shuts down one emotion, it shuts down them all. There's no button to remove sadness, but keep joy. There's no switch to turn off fear, but continue feeling love. When the emotional system goes into freeze mode, everything loses intensity. The color of life fades. The depth of experiences diminishes. Relationships begin to feel distant, even when you're physically close. It's like living behind invisible glass. You see everything, but you don't touch anything. People talk to you, laugh with you, hug you, try to connect, but the connection doesn't come through the glass. You respond, you participate, you function, but inside there's only that familiar emptiness, a kind of emotional echo. You're not sad, but you're not happy either. You're not broken, but you're not whole either. And that's the invisible cost of numbness. You stop being a participant in your own life and become an observer. Time passes, opportunities pass, people pass, and you feel like you're watching everything happen on a screen, as if you belong to another plane, a place where feeling is too dangerous. And this is where everything starts to connect with the previous videos in the series. In video 05, we talked about the false identity, the psychological mask created to survive unpredictable emotional environments. In video 8, we explored how this mask creates a hidden self-image that guides your behaviors. And now, in video 9, we reveal the mechanism that sustains this mask. Emotional numbness is the circuit breaker that prevents the mask from falling. If you felt too much, the false identity would be exposed. If you access deep emotions, you would begin to confront memories, traumas, needs, and pains that were filed away years ago. So the brain keeps everything dampened. It reduces the intensity of emotions to ensure that nothing overflows, not the pain, not the fear, not the inner truth you've learned to hide. But this protection comes at a high price. It also blocks love, connection, joy, creativity, enthusiasm. It reduces your ability to fall in love with life itself. It transforms you into someone who gets used to surviving, but not to living. The greatest risk of emotional numbness is not the pain it hides, it's the life it prevents. And deep down, a part of you knows this. A silent, almost extinguished part, but still alive, waiting for the moment to resurface. In the next part, we'll talk about how to get out of this state without triggering the internal alarm, and what the real path is to reactivate your sensitivity without breaking the system. There's a very common and very dangerous idea about how to recover emotions. The idea that feeling again depends on willpower, that all it takes is insisting, trying, pressuring, demanding some reaction from yourself to unlock what's dormant. But here's the truth no one told you. Forcing your emotions doesn't make you feel. It makes you shut down even more, because the brain that's frozen isn't malfunctioning. It's on alert. And when you try to push it to feel something it considers dangerous, it activates the alarm and trips the circuit breaker again. The way out is never through force. It's through safety. The brain only releases emotion when it believes you can handle it without falling apart. And that's the key that almost everyone ignores. Numbness isn't the end. It's a signal. I still don't feel safe to feel. So the process doesn't begin with emotion. It begins with regulation. The first step isn't accessing sadness, joy, or love. It's accessing the body, the foundation, the ground. The way back is physical before it's emotional. When you're frozen, your body loses its internal reference point. You don't feel your chest. You don't perceive your stomach. Your breathing becomes too shallow to be noticed. So, before any emotion, the brain needs to relearn what it means to exist within its own body. This can begin with simple things, so simple they seem too small to make a difference. Feeling the temperature of your hands, perceiving the weight of your body in the chair, lightly touching your forearm, noticing your breath descending to your abdomen. It's a slow thawing, and it needs to be slow, because if you overheat ice, it cracks. But if you heat it slowly, it turns back into water. And so it is with you. When internal security increases, the brain begins to release small amounts of emotion, not as explosions, but as approximations, a hint of sadness, a spark of joy, a memory that now seems bearable, a conversation that touches you a little deeper than before. This isn't regression, it's return. It's you reclaiming the right to feel. And little by little, you realize something subtle. The numbness wasn't absence. It was protection. And when you understand this without judgment, without haste, without violence against yourself, your system begins to trust that it no longer needs to keep you frozen. But there is one last revelation, one that connects the entire Mind Pattern Atlas series. Numbness isn't just a symptom. It's a self-preservation mechanism for your false identity. The mask built in Video 05, reinforced by the fear of Video 07, shaped by the hidden self-image of Video 08. It only persists because you don't feel. And the moment you start to feel again, even a little, the mask begins to crack. And what you truly are begins to emerge. It's not a quick process, nor is it simple, but it's real, and it's possible. And if, after hearing all this, you realize you're living in this automatic mode, disconnected from yourself, from people, from life, then here's the next step. In the next video, we'll reveal why, even when you find something good, you yourself destroy the chance to be happy before it hurts you.